Hi, well, welcome, guys. This is Jane Johnson here, and we're just starting a series of dialogues just to get a good recording of some of the material we've been discussing in some of our private chat groups, which has just been quite profound. And I wanted to be able to start to get some of that out there to you, so you can see the pace at which we are moving at. It's quite incredible that most of us started to get really comfortable in the order of Melchizedek, comfortable with the courts, presenting cases to different levels of courts, and even being invited on courts. And we were doing a lot of encounters around court cases, or going into the mobile court and dealing with accusations, mandating as kings, putting new laws in place. We've been doing that for over a year now, I think. Yeah, and many of us were really comfortable, but there seems to be a whole new season coming forth, and really around moving us to a different age. And I just wanted to clarify for any who have not heard around that, it's just so vital that we begin to operate out of different ages, and understand the concept of moving out of different ages, that we all operate, whether we like it or not, we all operate out of one age. Many of us are moving from the church age to the Ecclesia age, and battling with leaving, whether to leave church, traditional church or not. But those of us who've been in the order of Melchizedek, we're now finding that we are looking at the whole issue of moving to the season of the age of new beginnings, which means we've just had the most exciting time in the last few weeks with our different domain legislation groups, that we've had a complete change of what we're doing. And so instead of redeeming an old mountain, many of us were going in for accusations against giving the enemy a legal right to not allow this mountain to flourish. I had this immense revelation that we were actually redeeming an old mountain instead of looking at what would be a new mountain, the new heaven and the new earth. And when you look at that, it's really, really different what you do, and it's a lot more positive. It's a lot more big scale, big issues you're dealing with, but like broad brush kind of gestures. And I've personally found it really, really exciting, the difference, because the other was starting to feel very religious, protocol, repetitive, and really, if we are near the end times, the question is the earth going to why are we redeeming an earth if it's actually going to change completely? So I'll throw one question out there, which I don't know the full answer to yet, but it's just a recent revelation for you to really dwell on. But it was quite profound when it came to me yesterday. Was could we actually be able to create our own new heaven and new earth in our own world, if you see what I mean? So that we're not waiting for this magic event when suddenly there's a new heaven and a new earth, but it's a gradual transition. And it's the more we begin to act on it and operate from that age, the more our world can change. So we can begin to do things like translocating, infusing knowledge, telepathy, living without pain, having been pretty well healed, rich time, little sleep, living to an older age, those kind of things, which I think we've already seen quite a few are moving towards. So that's my big revelation of the week today. And what I'm just really would really love if people went away and really sought wisdom and sought heaven about what this whole issue around what the new earth and new heaven. I think it's quite profound. But guys, have you got anything you want to add to that, or question, or bring in a new aspect to discuss?
I'm just excited about all the discovery that's going on in all the different chat groups and all the different Zoom groups we've been having. It's one thing after another, and the pace is just picking up.
Yeah.
Very, very exciting, and it's just a matter of continuing to be open to all the new revelation coming at us.
Yeah, it is incredible, isn't it? I mean, it's just blowing us away. But I think
it is a long time ago. Long time ago, I told the Lord He could have my theology.
Yeah.
You know, just that was the point at which I got baptized in the Holy Spirit way back when. And you just have to hang on and go with all this new revelation that's coming. It's hardly even time to process it. You just got to go with it.
Yes, well, that's an interesting point, Bill, because that makes me wonder if we're being called to move at this fast rate, not only because we are closer to the end times than we think we are, but also to stop us processing and going back to operating out of the tree of knowledge. Because I think that's the tendency of all of us, isn't it? The moment we get something, we get a little bit scared that whether it's right, whether it's we've understood it right. So we suddenly look for all this backup knowledge, and then we start analyzing, processing with our mind. And before we know it, we're actually operating away from the tree of life. Whereas the tree of life is full of faith, adventure, trust, dependence, really, isn't it?
Right out on the edge at all times.
Yeah, which is a hard lifestyle until you're used to it. But almost, what's interesting is I find now I'm getting so used to that lifestyle that if it isn't fast-paced and if it is repetitive, my spirit can't tolerate it. Like, one thing I do every day is I call out for higher and higher revelation, and for less and less tolerance of the old ways, and for more. I frame up each day really amazing kind of achievements and things to come forth, and I find now that I'm actually operating with in a whole different dynamic than I was before, when I didn't have that kind of level of faith, really.
I'm still several steps behind you, and what comes to mind is one time I was a school teacher, and I had kids in my classroom that had been accepted to college before, like 4 years ahead of time. And I had kids in my classroom that couldn't spell. And I was trying to teach everybody. And I'm just wondering how we can continue the discovery, because it has to happen, and yet also meet the needs of the folks that aren't quite as much on the edge as the explorers amongst us are. I mean, some of us have discovery on our scrolls, and some maybe not so much. how do we design something that meets the needs so the explorers can continue to explore and pass along their information to those that aren't on the exploration expedition, but also not lose the one that can't spell? Because we have an obligation to all of them, and somehow there's got to be something that would meet everybody's needs. It's like the kid that can't spell just is not talking the same language as the kid that's been accepted to college 4 years ahead of time.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what we have.
I've got a few thoughts on that.
Okay.
That I feel like wisdom's kind of dropping into my understanding, because I think we have to remember it's so different from how we would run anything on the earth and a normal education system on the earth. So I was asking this question probably 5 months ago, and one thing I was told was that this isn't necessarily a journey for getting at the moment, for getting multitudes up to speed and competent. This is a journey to get a few to a very high level who are really operating in severe amounts of authority and dominion, who will then change the whole dynamics of the heaven and the earth, such that the multitude can come into that easily and quickly without even realizing that there's been a problem.
Okay, so the explorers and discoverers move along at their pace, and the ones that come behind won't have to go through all the paces and stages that they went through. They'll just accelerate and maybe even skip steps.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what was being revealed to me, which was quite a shock, that some will just come straight into some of the higher ages and will not even need to learn the older protocol. Although there is some value I'm seeing in not rushing to the highest age and suddenly thinking that you're there and you can operate at the age of Zion, because the issue with that is you don't get the depth of understanding of what heaven's like. So it's almost, I almost see it's like a balance, that if people can ride this road of not want to do everything in the same way they've done it before. So you don't even need the academic knowledge, you don't need the Bible knowledge, you don't need to read 100 books on a topic. But what you do need is to really be able to listen and be able to listen and hear and discern in heaven, be able to learn unity and working with people, not doing it at a distance, and also the openness to keep changing methods. And with those things, you can move through a journey that is actually way quicker than your predecessors did. And I think that's what we're seeing, that each new generation coming through is accelerating at a much higher pace. But they've still sort of grasped some of those key concepts. So those, for example, who decide in the courts are not for them, or benches are not for them, and they just want to, go into eternity, release frequencies, be in the stars, are not seeing elements of heaven that currently exist to draw on to get that deeper revelation of what the heavenly blueprint is. So it's a balancing act. It's not doing too much the old way but equally it's not accelerating so fast that you have a very shallow understanding of a lot of concepts. Or you're trying to do it at a distance. And I think what's happening is there's a lot who are listening to things, but if they're not actually in encounters with others, there is an element you're really not growing your ability to hear and discern well, because there's something so powerful when you do it live. And I think that's what I would say to anyone is really try and find a time, even though it's difficult. You know, sometimes you might trigger things in you, you might not get on with people, but that's the whole journey. That's what I see heaven is about, helping us learn to love each other and be in union. And until we've learned and deal with our own junk. And so until we've learned how to deal with our own junk, we can't engage with others. And when we don't engage with others, then we actually we don't hear as well. And also, if we don't look round at other material, we miss other parts. And then we fall into the trap of thinking that we've heard fully from God because that's all we've heard and that's all we can trust. But we only hear to the extent that our understanding is expanded from others and getting in little bits from others, and the age we're operating out of. So I can see all these different ways of operating that people are choosing. It's interesting when you interact with a lot, you can see these streams. And I think each stream has a danger, which we've got to keep asking ourselves, all of us choosing one stream or the other, which has a stumbling block, has a drawback, but asking what is that. There's also a stream of people who are just taking the track of the bridal love, and it's just about engaging the highest, what's the word, intimacy with God. But I also see they're missing some parts as well just by going that route. So I'm trying to steer the middle route of looking at all elements, but also finding a way of not getting overwhelmed. Oh, that's a really big topic though. How do you not get overwhelmed? I was actually convicted on that this morning that I had to write a page on it. I was given a mandate because I think that's probably the biggest stumbling block that people are finding is how do you deal with that overwhelm? But hopefully some of those things I've just said might have dealt with that.
My connection.
Do you have anything to do, any reflections that you've found to deal with overwhelm? Because you've done so well so far. You've coped, so you must have found some methods.
My connection's not really good. Were you speaking to Jill or to myself?
Oh, both either.
Jill, you want to go first? Otherwise, I'll go.
I actually, when Jane, you were speaking about the point where all the people supposed to heal themselves, or actually, so not overwhelm, I guess. So they are not triggered, because when that happened, there's discord and disunity, and I saw that happen, and that's important. That I think that people are in their faith walk, they have reached a certain point. Like Paul was kind of rebuking Corinthians because they were still like drinking milk when they supposed to like teach and disciple others. Excuse me.
Yes, yeah.
I just got it off. So that's why I think it's very hard, just like Bill talked about it. It's very hard when there are a group of people where they have a certain level, they have achieved, and there's another people they're just coming into this knowledge and try to glue them together. It's really hard. Other than, like, Jane, you shared the presence. Some foreigner going up high enough to bring down anointing and his presence, that it will just overshadow the whole lot of group together. Then maybe they can be coming together to operate together. But I think that's just really hard. I'm kind of supervising through fifth grade to 8th grade, and they just conform to their grade level. They don't quite really mix that well. They just group together, so they it's very hard to, like, try to intermingle different level of people all together and try to find unity. So that's like $1,000,000 question. How do we get there all together?
Yeah, I think we have to just keep one revelation which really hit me hard is we have to group around what age we choose to operate out of. So if you're with some people and they decide they want to stick with say court cases, for example, and the order of Melchizedek, and they are not happy with moving beyond that, then it might be that group has to split into two, and those that want to move on group and then attract others, and those that want to stay in that age stay there, and maybe even teach others about that age. So it's not a bad thing. I think that's what I've been seeing as well, that any splitting is a natural growth process, and without it a wineskin cannot keep moving and being healthy. And the moment actually it doesn't split and it doesn't transform and change that's actually when it's unhealthy, even though it looks to us like it's the opposite, doesn't it? That's what's we have to, I think, get our heads round is in the olden days we used to say, oh, all these church splits, isn't this terrible, this is not unity. But it was actually allowing people to move into different ages. And I think some people would have died if they felt they had to just stay in that church, and their spirituality probably would have been crushed, and they might have just become, a secular person. So if we can see the same, that it's actually these changes are not disunity, but healthy morphing. And those people say one person decides to stay in one age for a period, they might not do that for all their time. They might be just their walk with God needs to deepen to allow them to move on to a newer age, but they might do that within 6 months to a year. But if we're all networking and staying as one body and not taking offense and cutting off communication, we should still be able to find those other groups. And I think that's the challenge. We've got to get to working as one body, not taking offense, agreeing that that's okay if you're at that level and I'm at that level. And then there's the option of opening that door again and saying, oh, can I come in? Instead of people thinking, oh, well, you left us, you you know, walked out, I don't wish to relate to you. All these kind of negative trading floors that are going to destroy working as one united body. And I think that's what happened in traditional church, was those connections were severed, often actually really caused huge hurts that people had to be healed, took years to be healed from, that severing. Whereas if it had been a lighter perspective, that severing probably would not have been as dramatic, and the divisions would not have been created. I think I love, what is it, Justin Abraham talks about, I love the way he phrases it. He says, we're a family, we don't collect around doctrines. What's the opposite? I can't remember what he said now is the opposite. We don't collect around doctrines. Oh, that's right. So basically we're a family, we stick together regardless. And that's what you do with good families, isn't it? You don't drop somebody because they don't have the same values as you. You keep them in the family, but you agree to disagree and to compromise and to love them where they're at. And I think if that's something, if we can all grasp, we're going to produce a healthy wineskin. Because at the end of the day, if there is too much division and splitting off, the wineskin will probably just collapse. You know, if it goes and withdraws. And the other danger I have seen being revealed to me a long time ago was, we can end up, if we play with this and we're not willing to take the full cost, we can actually end up in the wilderness, because we'll see a whole new way of operating, but we will not be able to go back to the old way because it will feel way too dry. But if we can't find a way of relating to people in this new wineskin, we're in the wilderness. So that's the challenge, I think. If we can all be aware of that before we start, we're more likely to want to make it work, and then not be in that boat.
I
This has
totally
been
agree.
very helpful.
Sorry, go on, Bill.
I was just going to say, this has been very, very helpful to see that it's not the old church split thing with all the hurt and all the I'm not talking kind of thing going on. It's actually a healthy growth process. That's the one thing I heard from you that's very, very helpful. So that puts a whole new perspective on people moving on to what God has put in their heart. They move at their own speed and they group as they wish to group. And the second thing I'm hearing from you is that love covers everything. Love is the oil that keeps the gears from not grinding. It keeps things moving. And all the scriptures in the New Testament and in the old church age terms having to do with how we relate with one another are still applicable, I think, to any age that we move into, that those basic principles of how to get along with one another and how to love one another. So those two things, love covers everything, and that will make this easy. Secondly, just not being scared or concerned about people moving on. And the third thing that is I'm saying is simply, if you keep on going on ascensions with as often as you can, you're going to always have that thrill in your heart of meeting up with God and doing it as a group. And that will keep you from having these kinds of stumbling blocks get to you. If you've got that joy in your heart and that thrill of discovery and this team effort going on, that really is exciting, and that covers everything also. That's really what it's all about. The more you do that, the safer you are,
Yes, yes.
individually and as a group.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, what I find is really exciting is that sometimes I can be feeling a bit low and I'm a bit, I'm not really reaping the bliss of heaven, even though I might have had this incredible encounter the day before. But the moment I go in for a new one, I come out and I'm a completely different person. I mean, I'm just so full of bliss and excitement and joy, and the revelation is just been profound. That's catapulted me forward. That it seems to be for me really, really important. Whereas before I was never an intercessor and I was never a seer, and I would never crave prayer meetings, and in fact I used to have to drag myself there, and now it seems different. The whole dynamic's different. It's as if I need it. It's like I can't get the same on my own.
Mm.
And that's interesting, isn't it? It's because I've
Yes,
noticed
it
some
is.
people saying they're going to have a time of intimacy with God, and they're going to, back away from lots of things. And I'm thinking, how do you do that? Because it doesn't work like that for me. The moment I withdraw from people, it seems to, like, my revelation and my intimacy seems to go down.
I have never experienced anything before in my life as exciting as ascending as a group and having a brother or sister hear or see another brother or sister hear something else, and then somebody else hears or sees something, and the whole thing just works as a flow amongst the group and starts at a beginning and ends at an end an hour and a half later. In the meantime, you've done wonderful things and seen wonderful things as a body of believers. There's nothing like that. It is just God revealing himself amongst his people. And I think I've come to the place where I realize that an ascension is nothing more than pure revelation of God showing himself to us. That's all it is. I mean, you see this, you see that, and it's all him revealing himself to us. And actually, a little more, he reveals himself, and then he shows us how to participate in who he is and what he's doing. And that is really, really exciting. And it does not happen like that, to that level of excitement, individually as it does as a corporate group.
Yeah.
The stumbling blocks and the dangers happen on the off days, I would think. They're never going to happen in that ascension. It's almost like what illustration? Like a special forces person. They just live for battle. That's what they were born for. And sitting in the barracks and mopping floors and practicing is just not the same thing. And that's the same kind of thing. That's probably not a really good illustration because maybe not everybody identify with that. But doing what you're made for. And it's a corporate thing. It's not an individual thing. It's a corporate thing.
Yeah. Well, I've had a bit of a revelation on this. Actually, I think it was only a few days ago, because I was in this dilemma of what are we doing in encounters, and I was battling with, I'm not an intercessor and I'm not a seer, and why am I, spending all these days doing this? And I got the revelation that what's happening now, which is different from a traditional prayer meeting in the past, is all of us are operating in the four faces of God when we're in those encounters. And so we've moved away from the gifts where just, oh, there's a few intercessors, they pray. No, other people don't pray because they're not an intercessor. They do something else. We've moved away from gifts into operating in the four faces of God. And that's what happens in encounters. And I think that's why they're so exciting, because we're governmental. And so we are operating in the kingly function. We're actually seeing a strategy of how to deal with things and put things into place. We're doing the apostolic aspect, in the sense that we're looking at the really big picture and the big blueprint. So we're operating in that phase, which most of us didn't operate in. And it was up to somebody else to look at the big picture, and we just kind of went along and nodded and followed it. And the prophetic, we're now operating out of that phase, and the priestly function. So that, I think, explains why most of us come away with such an incredible ecstatic feeling, because we're operating at a whole new level. When we operate in those functions, which I actually see is how we were always meant to, but we got a bit sidetracked through church doctrine about the gifts, and we misunderstood it to a point. And it created this whole new dynamic that I think actually was never intended. And what was intended was this. And that was what was intended through the whole discipling process, that when we disciple someone as well, we do a bit of everything for them. So we don't send them off to somebody who will take them into the courts, and we don't send them off to somebody who will, the expert on their scrolls. But when we're discipling somebody, we're actually meant to help in all those elements to a point. And then when we know how to do that, then they know how to do that, which then they can multiply their life and go and do that for somebody else. Instead of, if we stick with this gift mentality again, we will create the old wineskin, because we will not be able to multiply our lives into other people. We'll have to send them off to experts who specialized in that arena, if you see what I mean. Can you see where I'm coming from on that? That's kind of the revelation I'm having at the moment, as I've been really grasping with wisdom and setting my heart on how does this whole discipling thing work.
Every one of us is meant to be fully functioning, mature, eventually.
Yeah.
And I see the gifts as training wheels. But now we're all meant to be a fully functioning vehicle of our own. We don't need the training wheels.
Yeah. Yeah, so you would agree, would you, Bill, that's kind of...
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's a concept that I don't think many of us are seeing clearly. And I think because a lot of us are still in the gift mentality, what's happening is streams are appearing in the new wineskin. And so few have actually been encouraged to disciple and multiply their lives. They've just been encouraged to go to certain streams for this service or that service. There are very few who have any discipling experience. So that's not even in their thinking of how you do the Ecclesia at all. So we're actually replicating some of those ways in the new wineskin. And we're still looking, we're looking for people to take us to the courts, people to teach us, people to help us with our scrolls. And if we can get to that point of all saying, every time we learn something, if we can pass that on, but not do it for those people, And I think that's what we've got to be very careful of, is we don't start going in and doing those things that will keep them in that state of dependence. And that's how we're going to multiply people, is by being a bit tough, really. I mean, I've had to turn down so many people. I mean, I get requests all the time, and you feel a bit horrible, but you know, in the end, it's like you're doing a favor, that you're making them more mature. Like you're effectively sending your child to school instead of keeping them at home and just, you know, treating them like a baby and doing everything for them. And they might be kicking and screaming, saying, I don't want to go to school. But you know, in the end, that's the way to maturity. And I think if we can get that understanding, that we don't, through our discipling, create dependence, but we encourage them just to go and try it for themselves, and eventually their spirit man grows to the point where they actually don't find it that a big a deal, and then they can just do it all the time. Because most of these things are like because we're living out the river of life now, we're all engaging these things at a greater pace. So it's almost like we've got to be able to do all these, you know, we've got to be able to quickly pop into the court of accusation on the move as we identify something that's not right, and do it as a 24/7 living in dual realms mentality. So we're not actually doing anyone any favors if they need to go to you to you know, have an encounter to deal with this or that. And that's what I find very exciting, is like a lot of people say to me, oh, you must have a huge prayer team, you know, to support you doing all this. And I say, no, I don't. I've like very occasionally I'll ask people to stretch the spirit over me, but most of it I have not run to anybody. I've just gone and dealt with it myself. And I've known that my spirit man has grown massively. And now I don't need these people to kind of, you know, prop me up when I'm having a difficult time. So that's a whole new concept, I think, as well. It's hard to communicate with people in the transition, but if they can see that big picture down the track, I think we'll have a whole new category of people whose spirit mans are just massive, and can cope with so much responsibility, pressure, difficulty, but be victorious.
Okay, Jane. Now, so I began with my classroom illustration with the folks that couldn't spell and the folks that were accepted to college already. And my thinking has completely changed from listening to you. What each of us needs is to be exposed to the folks that are on the cutting edge, so that we can see what the goal is that we're heading towards. And also, just even in this conversation here today, this dialogue, listening to you exposes the old thinking in my mind that I wasn't even aware was there. You don't know it's there until it's exposed. You think you're on the cutting edge yourself until you realize how much old thinking is hanging around in the corners of your mind from the past. And you don't even know it's there until somebody else that's thinking differently demonstrates their thinking in front of you. And then you realize, well, okay, I get it now. That's what I want to be. I don't, you know, that's my goal now. Okay, I see it. So, given my classroom illustration, you're better off to bring the college student into the class and say, here's what you're shooting for. This is where you're heading towards, and set your desire on being like this person is demonstrating right now, because I have discovered the desire is where I go. And example is, you're driving down the road and you get distracted, you looked off to the left at something that's happening over there, and while you're looking to the left, your car starts heading to the left, heading off the road if you don't look forward again. because your attention has been distracted to the thing on the side of the road. Your desire, what you're looking at, is where you're going to go. And this little conversation tonight has shown me again what I desire. What you describe is what I desire. That's what I want. But I don't know if that's what I want until I hear it and see it.
Well, I think that it has raised a really good point that actually I did feel was highlighted to me a while back, actually, in heaven, was to keep saying to people, look at like, if you look at a lot of my pages, even though you haven't got a clue what some of those words mean or what they are, you will see the big picture and you will see where you're going, which will make you realize how far you've got to go. And so don't spend too long on one aspect. But I think we have, the natural mind wants to say, well, oh, that's overwhelming. I'll just look at this until I've grasped it, then I'll move on. But what I saw in the early days when I first was engaging people was I saw people taking time, like, to look at something like the first love gate, and like spending like 3 months, studying and finding out about the first love gate, and then they would move on to the second concept. But I was one who kind of felt comfortable with those concepts anyway, so I rushed past that. But I'm so glad I did, because I had no idea at the time how much new revelation would keep would be thrown at you. But this brings me to a really good point of how not to get overwhelmed. Is I think I didn't get overwhelmed because I've never been one for academic knowledge at any rate, although I can look at a lot of material and pick it up quickly. But I didn't engage the tree of knowledge too much. And all I did was I heard concepts, didn't fully understand them, but what I did is I tried them in heaven, rather than going and finding a book on it and spending, 2 months reading a book on, say, the 9 voices of in the courts, for example. I mean, if you just go in daily, well, not even daily, like minute by minute, trying these things, the moment you hear a new concept, you try it, bam, you get this amazing encounter. It stays with you, you can remember it, and you can build on that pathway and go higher. But if you choose the tree of knowledge, you acquire all this knowledge, which is very likely you will forget, and you probably may find it really hard to repeat. You'll have no encounter, no real testimony that it's real. And some of those things you might have picked up might be a lower version or a lower age revelation at any rate. Because you have to remember, every bit of material out there is written from a certain age that person is experiencing. And so that's what you have to discern in the end. Is this a lower age? Therefore, shall I let that go and I'll find something else? But the encounters give you the energy to want to go, and the hunger to want to get more, whereas the knowledge saps your strength. Knowledge weighs you down. You've got facts, Bible references, you've got this and this, and you think, oh, I've got to keep this in my mind, I've got to keep this, and you're not drinking from the river of life, which is giving you that immense excitement and bliss. And what I found is interesting too is a lot of these concepts you don't actually revisit very often, other than the courts and the intimacy places. Some of the concepts, they you encounter, and then you seem to be taken onto another concept, because I think heaven is so vast as well. There's just, there's a million one places in heaven and things to check out, that often we're not called to keep going back to those same places. And so that's why we don't need a huge dialogue on one aspect to study it. We just really need to get that encounter that's meaningful for us, that we can then build on for the next level. Yeah, so those are probably my tips on not being overwhelmed. Unless you've got anything else.
Well, I'm hearing think explore instead of thinking school. I mean, we've all got these many years of school behind us that either was a good experience or a bad experience or whatever. Forget all that. Just think of exploring. You go down the path that an explorer goes from here to there. That doesn't really have to remember the path that they were on. Just going forward.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing from school. Forget school. It's not education. It's not mind. It's exploration. And that's exciting. That's fun.
Yeah. Well, it is, isn't it?
You don't have to remember a whole lot of things. You just got to keep on doing what's in front of you to be done.
Yeah, and I was quite staggered when I started how I barely had read anything, listened to anything, but after everything I heard, I immediately applied it, got immense revelation, and I actually got the big picture of my scroll probably, it was really quickly, probably 2 or 3 months of hearing about the existence of heaven and the realms, because I just asked and I took by faith, okay, I've heard now that there's a concept of men in white linen. Okay, who's my men in white linen? Bam, bam, bam. I mean, I don't even recall cleansing my gates. I mean, I was just so hungry for the truth, which I think just automatically cleansed my gates. I didn't have to go through all these sort of ritual religious protocols. And every time I had an encounter, it increased my desire for truth no end, that I was automatically, my gates were open. And each bit added a piece to it. And then I got nausea and men in white linen. I got lots of coronations really, really quickly. And I was like, I can't believe this is happening so quickly. Surely I'm not ready. I need to go and, sign up for a course. And I couldn't in the end. I mean, I was just so kind of excited by the exploration that I just kept listening to the odd podcast and then applying it. And then once the coronations happened, I knew my authority. And then when I got a clear understanding of my scroll, that allowed me then to put some other bits into place, which then fed my hunger. And that's the other thing I've realized recently is some people are struggling because they haven't identified their scroll, and the scroll absolutely accelerates you no end in wanting to do all this stuff in the heavenly realms. So if you can get that, at least just a very one small part, you don't have to know the whole lot. Some people are wanting to know the whole 7 mountains immediately, and then they're signing up for every group going and getting completely overwhelmed. If you just know one part, but really focus on that, it gives you such an excitement that you're starting to live out your highest destiny, that keeps you going as well and allows you to untether from the world of the pull of materialism and whatever else is going on in your life. And then gives you the energy to keep going. Or I guess the other experience I've seen people have is they what's the word? Yeah, they don't know how to untether daily and cut the soul ties from the pull of the world. So they'll do a few things, and then very quickly the cares of the world will come in, and they'll be, oh, I don't feel like going on an encounter today. I don't feel like doing this. I'm busy. I've got lots on. So what I've found I've had to do every day is cut those soul ties. And it's a nominal act I do. I just say, no, I choose to not bow to the pull of the world and all the things out there. And I untether from all that, and I tether to heaven. And then I'm sort of obedient, do those things, and I come away in an ecstatic state. And that's kept me going as well. That's what I've probably not felt that I've communicated that enough actually to people is how to cut soul ties and how to untether. But if there's anyone listening and you don't fully understand that, it's a simple concept. I mean, it's really a mind thing an act that you do really in heaven, that you just choose to cut off the pull of anything really. There's so many pulls in the world that are just trying to pull you away from your highest destiny, and it's a choice really, more than a long religious process. But I found that necessary. I mean, sometimes I've right before I'm due to go on something, I'll feel like, oh, I don't really want to do this, I'll just go outside and go shopping or sit in the sun, or I don't want to do this. And I can feel my soul crying out, oh, don't bother. And that, I think, if people can learn that makes a huge difference. Yeah. Any thoughts, Jen, on that? Do you have anything that you do to keep your motivation?
My motivation is just him, to be close to him, and I fully agree with what you have shared before about when there's a tear within the group, not to get offended is the key, and not excluding people. And I'm just going over what you talked about, and love, like Bill mentioned, has to be the glue, the factor amongst the group member, that, like you said, love covers multitude sins, and love has to be motivation to be with a group, to be with any kind of gathering, ascension.
Yeah.
And because he's love, and we are to reflect his love, and we are the ambassador and priesthood of love. So that has to be really, foundation of why we're gathering, why we get together, and I also had, when you shared about how we have to be like ascending, a lot of things, like we do have to, because we were taught religiously from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, a lot of our theology and thinking that we need to transform from, are rooted in there. So untethering and all that is very important, and keep ascending. And that's why I was gonna ask you about like other bench meeting or some other meeting that you're getting together. You're meeting once every 3 weeks, and I think we and I see the conversation going in the groups chat and stuff, but I tend to not get in there because we are in conversation from like earthly bound, and that's why I want to see more of us getting together and ascending, and from heaven we operate from heavenly perspective and get the wisdom and get the revelation where we are supposed to reign and rule and legislate and all the things that we're supposed to do. We need to do it from heaven onward, not from earth up. So I think it's necessary for the group to go up together and, you know, operate from heavenly perspective, you know, get the revelation from, because a lot of your revelation came from when you go up with the group or even by yourself. And I think when people are doing that together more often, and I agree with you also about how when 2 or 3 gather together, there's certainly more, you know, that anointing atmosphere that I myself tried to do it by myself, wasn't able to get. A lot of us get things like, you know, other sister would talk about something and then that will trigger another person and then that'll trigger me, and it just, we are keep going up, and we are not stuck in one place, but ascension itself is just keep on going up higher and higher. So.
Yeah. So can I ask you, what, when you said earlier on about intimacy kind of drives you to want to untether, what if you don't feel that? What do you do if some days you're feeling really secular, and how do you get into that place where intimacy drives you as a motivation to engage heavenly realms?
It's just for me, I just even though I walked this faith walk in short time, I am like the disciple, you know, Peter said, where else can we go? You have the word of life. Word. You know, when other disciple left, because when Jesus said, drink my blood and eat my flesh, and it was hard teaching, and to just know that this is the only way, there's no other way, drive me to, even I hit and keep on hitting and haven't had a breakthrough where I really am seeking, and in that I still learn there's things to be, like what you said about the untethering. It's actually letting go. It's surrendering.
Yeah.
If you keep holding on to it, you are just still intertwined, and you have to cut that by letting go and surrendering. In that you are severed from the things of the world, and it's just a process too. You know, you think, oh, I'm away from this, but there's still some other stuff that it's still hanging on to me. So it's process, and just keep going through the process and keep cutting and keep attaching myself to the Lord and cutting away from because our DNA was like so connected with the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I mean, I think I'm just pulling the root. Like every day I have to like examine my thoughts and, oh, I'm still yet thinking this way. Okay, I gotta change. So it's keep transforming, changing and renewing my mind to keep on going and to just look into his love when everything else dried up and still yet I have a breath to live. He is still connected to me. He gives me life to live so I can live and love him back. So
yeah, that's great. I like the way you said, the thing that stood out to me was you said, oh, there was no other way of living. And you knew that in your mind, and I think that's a beautiful perspective. That when we can see that the other ways actually they don't reap a lot of fruit. You know, materialism, buying new clothes, new holidays, partying, whatever. In the end, they dry up very quickly. They can be, you know, expensive. We can't maintain that lifestyle. But yeah, that there's no other way than Jesus is. I think that's a beautiful perspective. That really, yeah, is an untethering perspective, really, isn't it? It's a way of saying, in the end, those rivers will dry up or create problems, dependency, overspending, or whatever. But this river doesn't dry up. So yeah, I love that. So we should probably finish shortly. I just wanted to ask you very quickly if you have any testimony or anything you want to share briefly before we finish, or anything that's really sort of exciting at the moment. Any revelation that
I just want to thank you, Jane, for you know, the Ascension group that you formed, and I was able to join the other one, and I cannot go into that one, but I was able to join the other meeting that you formed, and for me, like I said, I am still in the process of just going through a lot of stuff that you were talking about and writing up, you know, to find out about what are the 12 fruits of the tree of life, and you know, all the stuff that you're discussing. I mean, I am growing because of you have given the opportunity for all this Ascension group that I can join, so that I'm able to see more with the, you know, group of the sister and brothers in Christ. And you know, I hold on to that because it's really precious to me, that I wasn't able to do it before, and now I'm doing it more because you have created this group of people who stand regularly.
Excellent. I mean, I think all we're doing really is every time we do an encounter, we are opening more kind of doors in heaven. And so I think this is why the revelation is just flooding out to all of us, because each one is so powerful. And then we're each sort of getting excited by the next revelation. So it's an amazing time, really. How about you, Bill? Anything?
Well, I was going to agree that exact scripture that was used about the words of eternal life, and where else can we go? I mean, I spent so much time in the desert with God untraining me from what I'd been trained previously in church experience. And it's just exactly that. This is my heart desire. I'm closer to Jesus right now than I've ever been in my life.
Mm.
And for me, you were asking about staying on path. For me, my quest all my years has been to hear his voice clearly. And I've never had as clear moments of hearing his voice as I have had recently. And it's getting clearer. There's still many moments when there's a cloud between me and him, and don't hear it quite as clearly. But those brief moments when the cloud goes away and his voice is very, very clear, that's what keeps me. That's my quest. And as long as I'm searching for that, I'm not going to go back, because there's so much desire for that. But just the few months that I've been here too has been acceleration in my life, tremendous acceleration, and the opportunities and the different chat groups that are available and the pages that are available, the tools that are available. Everything you need is really there between the people and the information that's available. And this whole conversation has been very, very helpful, because it's revealing how much it's not a knowledge thing. It's an adventure, and it's a relationship thing with the Lord. And it really very, very helpful. I find actually coming here, I learned about dialogue, which is what we're having here.
Yeah.
Just that whole concept of people talking.
Yeah, because I think I think I fall into this trap thinking, oh, if we dialogue like this, we're eating off the tree of knowledge. But what I think I'm seeing is that we are, because we're actually residing in heaven now, 24/7. When we speak, we're actually speaking out heaven and the wisdom, as if we were in an encounter. And that's what I've noticed now, that I'm like speaking, and sometimes I'll say stuff and I didn't even know it was in my head. I hadn't academically worked it out, but through the dialogue, which is really the unity between the body, which is a heavenly principle, that when we gather, something miraculous happens. So I'm kind of like seeing, oh yeah, there is value for that as well, because that's what's happening, is we're actually speaking out from wisdom a lot of the time, and we're even if we're not necessarily saying something, a new revelation, we're opening up a question. Oh yeah, and that's another major thing I wanted to communicate to people, is I've discovered it's when you formulate a question in your mind, the revelation comes. But it's almost until if you're not ready to ask that question, the revelation can't come. It's almost like a doorway. And the moment you ask that question, I suppose it's because it sets desire, it sets intent, and those are the values of heaven. And you're craving that kind of knowledge, so you're open, your spirit's open. Then I found, bam, 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 bam. Sometimes I'll be walking around doing something else, and bam, the revelation will just pop in. It's not that I've intentionally been in an encounter, or it will just be there, and I'll get an absolute wow moment. So I do really encourage people to just keep trying to formulate what the question is that you want to know next in your walk with God. What do you want to know? And if you set that desire, I think you'll find that the revelation will come to you, even on your own, without others. So that's what's really interesting. And I think that's what I'm trying to do with the dialogue page. If you haven't heard of the dialogue page, it's a fairly new thing we've got going, but it's just basically anytime you have a question, you can post that question. It's not just my questions, it's open for anyone. But as long as it's a question, not a statement. And we have had the most, I have had the most, been on an incredible journey through that with what people have shared. They've given me snippets of insights, and when I've taken that to heaven, it's like foundations being built on each other. And I've had the most intense walk through that page. So that's what that's there for, really, which is to engage the principle of the body working together, dialoguing. So yeah, do check that out if you've not seen that. It's called Ecclesia Framework Dialogue page. Okay, guys, we'll better conclude. Thank you so much for coming on today, and I'll try and set another day, maybe in 3 weeks' time, to do this. And if people can come with any questions, testimonies, and we can see where we're led. But it's been great.
It's been wonderful. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Jane.
No, pleasure. Thanks, Jen. See you, Bill.
God bless you.
Thank you. You too.